Hear me, my fellows, as I stand aside, both too late and too early. I am weighed down by an infinite amount of regret. Regret to how I failed to keep the greatness of our passion pure. And though there was nothing I could do to stop it, I hold that regret all the same. For it was that weight that held me down to the humble earth. But now as I become too old, and see the dreadful way the world is going, I ask every one of my fellows to make a promise to me. Please, do not let our passion become a weapon. The 5th Merlin, 1916. Departure speech from the position of Merlin of the Grand Council. Monday Funday. The culture of wizards is one made of contradictions, at least from the viewpoint of the mundane. A natural quirk resulting from the wielding of cosmic power. While magic users of other kinds may fall out of these, spellcasters of pure humanity all develop the strange tendencies of ascribing the same action to situations on the extreme ends of a scale. For example, knocking on a neighbor's door before entering. Mundanes will always knock up to a point where they feel like family. Wizards would do the same, but would also enter the home of a stranger without invite or announcement. The reason for this is because an uninvited wizard is denied their power, and are thus showing a gesture of nonviolence. There is always a reason for a wizard's strangeness. Another tendency is locking doors. Wizards will only lock their door if they feel a lock is needed or pointless. Such as the door to the study of one Professor Runesir, whose son, Runesir the Younger, had announced himself after failing to open the door. "It's charmed, southbound," the man answered. His son waved a hand over the knob and shaped the well-worn opening charm to the equally well-worn locking charm. He then entered to find his father sitting in a reading chair. "Son, have you need of me?" "No, sir. I only come to deliver a memo from my school." The boy lifted the stack of papers he had brought with him. "Though perhaps I could find opportunity to ask for your schedule for this evening." It was full with talks with the university administration. The man dog-eared his book and set it aside. "Though now it's clear upon hearing your concern." "You need not address my concern so hastily, father." "Agreed, son. My action was quicker than needed, yet it is done. Have you a request for my time this evening?" "Yes, if it's not a bother," the boy answered with a nod. The man laughed, breaking the formal exchange. "Of course not, son. I'm your father. I will always have time for you. What do you want to do this evening?" "Well, I was hoping we could review my line crafting." The man laughed and stood securing the book into his coat. "A private lesson. Son, you know there's more to life than studying magic." "I do. In fact, my afternoon is already filled by activity thanks to that infernal hellspawn I have for a teammate." "Adrian is a good lad, and it's good to connect with your friends. But why do you want to focus on a study tonight?" "You know about the other hellspawn in my class, the spell-casting one." "Aye, what about him?" "He's advancing in his own studies at a significant pace. I cannot let him pass me. Not in this." "A rivalry, then?" "What?" The boy scowled at that. "No, he's not my rival. I simply cannot allow an infernal magic user to best us." "Us?" The man smirked at his son. "Us of arcane magic." "I see. Well then, it's decided. After class I will return here for our private lesson." "Thank you, father. I appreciate this." The boy bowed his head and left the study. He headed towards the front door and stopped to look at the few pictures they had hanging. Most were of the Runesirs, older and younger, but in the center was one with a young woman wearing a star-blue wedding dress. The Lady Runesir who had passed away the same day the younger was born. After a moment, Runesir the Younger stepped out over his family's threshold, becoming simply Runesir. as there was no one else to compete with for his family name. The Runesir estate wasn't grand by any noble measure. Near 3 acres, as close to square as possible, a wood line surrounded the lot with no clear path through. In truth, the estate was deep in the forest, miles from the urban limit. It wasn't uncommon for most upper-class wizards who made a living in mundane cities to set up plots as far as reasonably possible and simply commute. Of course, the commute was done through gateways, portals cut through other side to allow instant travel, though sometimes shortcuts were needed. 2 paths close enough in other side to be reasonably safe. The Runesir family did not skimp on their wayfinding, though. It was a gateway that Runesir stepped through to arrive in the alleyway of a craft shop. After passing through, Runesir stepped into the shop, as he did every morning he came through. The shop clerk greeted him. "Good morning, little Rooney." "Aunt Margaret, please," Runesir said back. "We've talked about this. I know. I remember every complaint you filed with me, verbal and written." Margaret gestured vaguely to the back of the shop. The shop was a merchant house that was owned by the Runesir family. Margaret Runesir was the current occupant and shopkeep. The shop itself was unnamed, known often only as the Runecraft Store. It was a store dedicated to the crafting of magic items. Staff, rings, cloaks, and of course, the core feature of any magical arsenal, spell books. Both fresh and blank, as well as filled and ready. "And yet," Runesir griped. "And yet I am your aunt," Margaret replied. "I'm family." "This is true," Runesir said evenly, "and for that I continue to complain rather than argue." "Oh, drop the formal wizard speak," Margaret rolled her eyes. "I get you're more stuck up than your father and grandfather, but I'm your Auntie Marge." Runesir sighed and rubbed his eyes. "Shouldn't I practice an attitude of constant vigilance?" "If you want to be boring, sure," she shrugged. "I do. Good day, Aunt Margaret. I'm leaving." Runesir turned and left the shop. As annoying as he found his aunt, she was indeed family, and with that came the obligation of visiting whenever convenient. And so Runesir did every morning and evening, going to and from home. The school was only a mile away from the shop. The next closest way was 10 miles away, through not 1 but 2 shortcuts. Runesir arrived at West Progress High with time to spare, and headed straight to class. All the while he scanned the halls. The school was a tapestry of every demi-type on the roster, as well as many subtypes. Magic users made a fair bulk of the student body, but among them were divisions based around the many nuances between them. In his class were only 3 different kinds of spellcasters. The first was Jessica Black, the black-clad quiet girl with her strange black tome. She was a caster of an eldritch nature. She didn't even write out her own spells, but rather followed the instructions of higher beings older than time. A perfunctory and pathetic entry to the roster, barely worth the minimum of attention. It was the second that Runesir aimed his efforts to. Abraham Prince, a scion of a mundane woman and one of the rulers of damnation. An antichrist who had been baptized and freed from infernal influence, but not denied the infernal power of his blood. He mimicked the mannerisms of the magically infused, but his talent was sourced from the will of damned blood. Still, his skills in the craft were top-notch, at least for their tier. Runesir was also highly skilled in the arts of magic. Born to a long line of wizards, Runesir prided himself on continuing the legacy of his family. A family that had advanced the art of spellcraft without assistance from other beings. The Runesirs worked through vigilance and tedious record-keeping. They held no covenant except with that which was before them. They worshipped no god and dealt with no devil. They rejected the claims to Job's bloodline, and they denied the blessings of damnation. They were atheists and proud. Yet still Abraham seemed to always be just ahead of him. In every bout between them, Abraham always managed to fall just behind Runesir. A classic rivalry to anyone looking on, but no such thing to Runesir, who alone knew that while every challenge ended in victory for him, they also left him near collapse from exhausting his well of mana. Whereas Abraham seemed to only use a dip of his reserves. Only a romantic would cast them as rivals. Abraham was an enemy to be surpassed and defeated, and Runesir would not allow it to be any other way. "Mornin', Rooney!" Naziri greeted as she sat next to Runesir. He sighed. "I've told you about nicknames." "Stop having such a thick name," Naziri said. "How can a name be thick?" "I don't know. That's your field of study, not mine." "What's your field of study?" "Being cooler than you." Naziri laughed, but then her face sunk into a scowl. She turned away and mumbled something to herself. Runesir acted like he didn't notice and continued on. "Names have power to them, and power must be respected. So please use my full name." "We don't know your full name," Ashley said, leaning in. "We don't even know your last name." "Runesir is my family name," Runesir explained. "And I hide my given name to protect myself." "Really? How so?" Ashley tilted up her head. "Don't answer that, Runesir," Lucas said behind her. "Your name is a link to you. Having someone's name allows for direct targeting." "And Runesir couldn't explain that because?" Naziri asked. "Because he would have spent 2 hours explaining it." "Please," Runesir scoffed. "Identity tilting theory only takes a solid hour at most." "Is that including all the extra questions?" Lucas asked. Runesir did not answer. About then the teacher came in and class started. During lunch, Runesir went to the library to check for a book he needed. He found the book as soon as he entered. It was in the hands of the librarian, as he stamped the due date and handed it to a young girl. A fairykin girl. "Gwendolyn!" Runesir announced himself, and Gwendolyn jolted in shock. She turned and started to stammer a greeting. Runesir looked at the book she held. "Is that the last copy?" "What?" Gwen blinked, and then also looked at the book she held. "Oh, yeah. I didn't see another." "Why are you checking it out?" Runesir asked. "Because..." Gwen frowned at the question. "To study." "To study what? What need have you of such a text?" "I need to practice my magic." "Your fey sorcery?" Runesir said, as if it was a vulgar swear. "What study is there for the subject?" A lot, I guess." "You guess?" "I don't know." "If you have no base for the subject, then why seek such a manual?" "What? No," Gwen protested. "I do know how to do magic." "Bold claim, fairy." Runesir narrowed his eyes at her. Gwen blinked her eyes hard, before straightening her back and lifting her chin. "I don't have to take that. You don't get to just sneer and talk down to me like that." "You dare make a claim so bold?" Runesir barked. "What right have you to even stand under this roof with me, fairy?" "Why are you being mean to me?" Gwen stepped back. "You stood up to Adrian last week, but now you hate me?" "Adrian's poor attitude has nothing to do with this," Runesir full-on yelled. "This is about you pretending you belong here." "Alright, that's enough out of you," the librarian shouted as he slammed his hand down and rose to his feet. "If you want a book, then get one. But don't you even think about harassing others in my library." Runesir pointed to the book Gwen held. "This book is the one I want." "Well, she just checked it out. I can place a hold, but other than that, you're out of luck." Runesir hissed. "Fine. 'Twas only a matter of convenience." Runesir turned and left the library to join his team at lunch. As Runesir sat with his team, Mary was the first to speak up. "Library didn't have what you needed?" Runesir sighed. "They did, but another managed to reach it first." "Who?" Mary asked. The question was reflexive. She wasn't trying to imply or suggest anything, merely asking for a detail she thought was innocent. Still, Runesir knew better. Not important. I'll simply make a visit to the local library and search there. I think it's important, Ashley said between mouthfuls. I mean, who else is into boring book stuff like you? Ashley, let the man be, Lucas said, pecking at his own meal. Nah! Adrian barked out and looked to Runesir. I agree with Blondie. Who the hell would want to read some boring book about circles? Runesir didn't grit his teeth as he said, Not important. To that, Kevin said, If it's not important, then why are you treating it so importantly? Just tell us. Runesir sighed. It was seized by our classmate, Gwen. Instantly, Kevin showed regret on his face. Mary rolled her eyes, and Naziri rubbed her temples in annoyance. The fairy girl, you say? Adrian chuckled a bit. Well, Runesir, if this book is so important, why don't we go and just take it? You're not allowed to bother her, Adrian. Mary pointed her finger to him. You gave your word. I said I would leave her alone, Adrian said with laughter in his voice. Needlessly bothering her would be a violation of that. But challenging her to help a friend isn't. We could go jump her and take the book. Mary snapped back, No! Naziri followed with, Absolutely not. Lucas joined in with, We won't be participating in that. Ashley swallowed and said, Yeah, I like Gwen. Adrian huffed at them and turned to Kevin. What about you? Kevin groaned and sighed. Sure, dude. But don't you think Runesir should have the final say? Yeah. Adrian turned to Runesir. How about it? You, me, and Kevin. We're more than enough to take on that walking flower stalk. As much as I appreciate the offer, I must decline. Adrian tissed at that. Whatever. I figure it could have been a good team exercise. Mary slammed her palms on the table and stood leaning forward, centering herself in the circle. I am the team leader here, and as team leader, I forbid you from suggesting bullying as a team exercise. Fine, mutant girl. Adrian returned to his meal. You're the boss. Mary huffed and sat back down, getting back to eating herself. So we're still doing a team day? Kevin asked. Yes, Mary confirmed. We haven't spent a single day as a team. Adrian opened his mouth to say something, but was cut off. Outside of combat practice. And only 4 of us are actual combatants. 3, Lucas chimed in. Don't count me or Ashley as combatants. How do you know she didn't mean Nazi? Ashley asked. She didn't, was Lucas's answer. That made Adrian laugh. After dismissal, Team J4 exited the school front together. Adrian took the lead. Alright then, where to? The arcade? Dude, no, we always go to the arcade, Kevin protested. Yeah, because the arcade is awesome. But I guess I get your point. Adrian rubbed his chin. We need somewhere bold and lively. I need to stop by the public library, Runesir said. Bold and lively for everyone, not just book nerds like you. To find the book I need, remember? Runesir furrowed his brow. Oh yeah, Adrian said, rubbing his chin. You know, we could still track down that fairy girl. No! The rest of the team chimed in unison. Fine, we'll go by the library first. Adrian huffed and then marched off the school grounds. Hey, Mary shouted. I'm still the leader here. Adrian shouted back without breaking stride. Then come lead already! Mary sighed and jogged up in front of Adrian. They headed to the edge of the inner city ring, where the public library stood. Its massive bulk stood out even among the towering building. Damn! When did they write so many books? Adrian said, scanning the main lobby. Over the last 10,000 years, Lucas answered. give or take a few decades. Wow. Who knew there were so many nerds in the world? Runesir ignored them as he ventured into the library. A quick trip to the card catalog and a longer trip to a deep corner of the building, Runesir found a copy of the book he needed among a series of tattered tomes. An older edition. Opening it, he found someone had scribbled various notes throughout the tome, in margins and between paragraphs, even scratching out sentences and writing over them. Those often had insults written near them. "The basic complexities of the basics," a deep voice chimed. Runesir turned to find an old man wearing an even older suit. "A fine read for the right mind." Agreed. Runesir looked the man over. A bushy white beard and bald head. He smoked a pipe and wore a monocle. He didn't feel magical, which meant he was not magical, or was a wizard of unbelievable power. I am hoping I am such a mine. "Don't be so humble, young man," the older man said. "You would not have come here if you were not a notable mine." "Are you knowledgeable of my identity, sir?" Runesir asked. He had no idea who this man was, or what he was. His words seemed measured, but coincidence was always possible. "I don't know who you are, but I guess you're a wizard, and..." The man made a count on his fingers. "You showed a great deal of respect to me just now, so I'll be direct. I can't allow you to take that book." "For what reason?" Runesir said, still measuring his words. "Who are you to boldly declare this?" "I am the head librarian of this department. I have been for the past century, since before the international conflict. Yes, I am a demi-human." At that, Runesir concluded that he was not a magic user, but likely very powerful. "And why can't I take this book?" "It is old. You need special permission to check that book, but you can read it in-house if you wish." "What permission do I need? Would a college professor's word be enough? If so, I'll say my father is a professor at the university." The old man scowled at that and stared at Runesir. "You're Runesir's boy, aren't you? Your arrogant attitude is clear in your stride." "Do you have issue with my family?" Runesir scowled back. He didn't know this man. "No, just your father, the punk," the man sighed. "Though I guess he is a professor now, and he can check out books here. So I guess I can let you have it." The man turned and strolled away before Runesir could say more. With that, he checked out and joined his friends. "Hey, Rooney," Adrian called out. "We decided we're going to the mall." "Don't call me that." Runesir sighed before asking, "How was this decided?" "Kevin and Naz never been," was Adrian's answer. Provo Mall, stretching over 300 acres, was a centralized hub for shopping and other entertainment. It was called a family-friendly red light district with a movie theater, skateboard ring, roller skating ring, virtual battle sims, shopping for any and every interest, and at the center a food court with every cuisine known to man. On the surface, it was painfully mundane. Even with Progress City having a per capita of 1 out of 7 people being demi-humans, Promo Mall served millions of people from all around. With less than 1% of all people being demi-humans, they became incredibly rare outside the city limit. You could still spot some around, if you knew how. There was always a telltale sign. Large, bulky muscles that didn't seem to restrict movement. A pairing of overly stoic and overly bubbly attitudes. A strange nervousness that showed more the more comfortable one became. Light mumbling when no one else seems near. A fiery temper under a calm demeanor. A fine dress set with a confident aura of contempt. Of course, no one noticed the group as they walked off the tram system that ran between the mall and the train stations. "Wow!" Ashley gawked around. "It's so amazing!" "You've been here before," Lucas said. "Many times." "And it never gets less amazing," Ashley said as she bounced around. Cool, now what? Kevin said. I see a lot of stores, but I don't have any money. What? None? Mary asked. Yeah, none. I get a pity fund from the government and nothing else. Okay, sorry. Mary raised her hand. Don't be sorry, Adrian said as he jabbed Kevin's arm. But a good leader should know these things. Indeed, Runesir added. In fact, you should have gathered such details beforehand. Though I'm not surprised with you being a mutant from a mundane family. Kevin, punch Runesir, Adrian ordered, and Kevin jabbed Runesir's arm. Mutants aren't my favorite brawl mates, but you gotta respect leadership. Runesir rubbed his shoulder and scowled. I wasn't being disrespectful. That is, I spoke not out of disrespect, but rather to simply state the point. Why do you talk like that? Kevin asked, annoyed. Do you just not know how much of a tool you sound like? Runesir scowled back. Well, I was about to offer a loan, but if you find me so repulsive... I don't need your charity, Kevin shot back. It's not charity, it's a loan, you thunderdolt. Ashley laughed at that. Thunderdolt? Wow, that's good. Lucas, what's a dolt? A person like Kevin, but less conductive, Lucas answered. Fuck you, Kulo! Kevin turned to him, but before he could turn back too, Mary stepped in. Enough! There is to be no fighting, she looked to Adrian, with anyone. We are here to have fun. Do I make myself clear on that? Runesir lifted his chin to that before nodding sharply. Yes, you have. To that I will re-extend my offer. Kevin, if you want, I will loan you a reasonable sum, so that you may enjoy this day to its full extent without any worry. Kevin hissed and scowled again. I told you! Just take the damn money, Kevin, Adrian barked. You can fight him later if you're so damn offended. I am. Kevin gritted his teeth as sparks started to flow around him. Mary stepped in and poked him in the chest. No! No fighting! Is that clear? Just take the loan. Kevin huffed and growled. Fine. How much are you giving me? Runesir pulled out a wallet and produced a stack of large bills. He gave Kevin an amount equal to a laborer's monthly salary. Here, no interest. You have until the end of school year to pay it back. What the fuck? You just have this much on you? Kevin asked, counting the bills. More. I have my own spending money after all. You're not worried about getting mugged? Mary asked. I am Runesir. Anyone capable of mugging me would be after more than mundane currency. Could I get a loan? Naziri asked, raising her hand. Runesir smiled. My father is a professor at the city college. And while I do have a healthy allowance, the fortune you see is a result of casual hoarding, so it's rather limited. I'll split this with you, Kevin said, holding the stack up. No way I'm going to be able to spend all of this. Naziri agreed, and they each took a fortnight's salary. With the matter of funding settled, the group explored the mall with Ashley playing tour guide. She pointed at every store and listed their inventory, from clothing shops to skate shops to art shops. Promo Mall had shops for any and every interest. Ashley continued to point out shops, but the first one visited was one Adrian pointed out. Hey, comics! He pointed over the group and they all looked to see the storefront of Telltale Myths. Telltale Myths was a media company that sold comics. A popular subject was that of demi-humans. Mage Wars, Fairy Court, and Doing Nothing Forever, to name a few. Though one of the most popular comic series was 30 Years to Die, a comic based and set throughout the 3-decade-long period known as the International Conflict. With thousands of issues published, it was still releasing new tales of those gruesome times. The latest issue to publish caught Runesir's eye. He pulled a copy off the shelf and looked it over. The issue was about a battle between a wizard and a horde of undead soldiers. You like it? The clerk smiled. It's pretty good. Really dramatic. Don't want to spoil anything, though. He dies, Runesir explains. As his few allies focused on moving innocents out of the area, he held the horde off. In the end, he's left defenseless and gets overran. You know this story? Yes, this man is my grandfather. Really? The clerk stood up straight. So you're a wizard? Yes, of the Runesir family. Grandson of Peter Runesir, the Wall of Georgia. Adrian took the comic out of Runesir's hand. So this is about how he got killed? Yes, fighting an endless platoon of undead soldiers. But he didn't fall until every soul was safe. Adrian grinned wide. So your grandpa was a badass. That is one way to put it, Runesir said, rolling his eyes. Cool. I'll buy a copy. Runesir snapped his gaze up to his teammate. You don't have to. I know. Didn't ask you. Adrian tissed as the clerk rang up the book alongside a stack of other comics. I like stories of badasses being badass. Doesn't matter who they're related to. Runesir merely huffed and continued to browse as the others made their purchases. He didn't buy anything, as he preferred written text over graphic depictions. History books were a better read than flourished comics. Always have, always will. As the group left the shop, the sound of a distant earthquake came from Ashley's stomach. They looked to the petite blonde, who just smiled and asked, Can we go to the food court next? No one objected, and soon they were at the heart of Promo Mall. The food court was a temple unto itself, 3 floors holding its selection of food. The group went to order their desired meals, and with the group order at least tripled the average, though this was due to an outlier. For while Adrian and Kevin had full platters, Runesir ate a simple meal, Nazuri and Mary were sharing an order, and Lucas had abstained. Ashley had ordered enough to feed a platoon. Where do you put it all? Nazuri asked, watching Ashley wolf it down like nothing. I mean, Adrian got his muscles, and Kevin's got his ego, but you're like one of those fashion models. Such things are not important, Lucas answered before Ashley could swallow and speak. I don't really know, Ashley pondered for a moment. I've always had a big appetite, but no one really said anything about it. Because such things are not important, Lucas repeated, and looked around the table. Now, please, drop the subject, please. Come on, man, Kevin rolled his eyes. What's the big deal? Why shouldn't we talk about how Ashley belongs in our freak world of freaks? Because I'm asking nicely, Lucas said, holding his gaze on Kevin. The two stared each other down until Adrian interrupted them. Good enough for me. Adrian set his drink down and burped loudly. We don't need all those details to trust each other. Only need to know each of us is trustworthy. And you think all of us here are? Runesir asked with a raised brow. Yep. Adrian grinned. I'm a good judge of character, and I know each of you are good teammates to have. Especially Kevin, right? Ashley giggled. What's that supposed to mean? Kevin snapped. Just pointing out how you two are more than just teammates. Ashley cooed, and the boy seemed to be embarrassed. Come on, it's not like that, Ashley. Adrian rubbed the back of his neck. Kevin is just the best brawler next to me, so we back each other up. And the reason why you two always hang out at the arcade? Because we're friends, Kevin snapped. Friends can hang out. Okay then, Ashley agreed nonchalantly. Don't say it like that, Kevin snapped again. Enough! Mary cut in. I said no fighting, and that includes over relationships. Whether Kevin and Adrian are friends or confidants doesn't matter right now, because this is a team activity. Nazuri rolled her eyes. Wow, team leader. Way to make hanging out sound like a chore. Shut up, Naz, Mary barked back. That's an order. The table burst out in laughing, breaking all the tension in the air. Even Runesir was hiding a fit of chuckles. Soon after, Ashley finished her last bite and declared herself full, and with that the group returned to exploring the mall. They mostly window shopped and scouted for different attractions. They weren't interested by the different skating rings, and they couldn't agree on a movie. The battle sims were the only thing that had a majority on. But when Adrian learned there was no physical contact allowed, he switched his vote to be with Runesir, Mary, and Kevin. After another round of window shopping and a brief visit to a clothing store, led by Ashley, the group decided it was time to head back home. Walking back to the tramport they had come from, they were stopped by some gang of hooligans. They seemed to be teenagers and didn't show any signs of otherness, but their faces were lined with contempt. "You guys got some nerve, you know," the leader said, using a bat he had to point at the group. "This place ain't for your kind." "Our kind?" Adrian asked, already prepared for a fight. "What's that supposed to mean?" "You freaks of nature, mutant, demi-humans, whatever you call yourself," the leader explained. "This is a place for regular humans. You don't belong here." "Oh yeah?" Adrian stomped a foot forward before Mary put an arm out to stop him. "No, I said no fighting, none." Mary pushed Adrian back, and he folded his arms. "Listen, we don't want trouble. In fact, we're leaving now." "Good to hear," the leader said. "And I assume you know better than to ever come back." "Fuck you!" Kevin shouted and stepped forward. "You fucking culo mundo! We'll go wherever we please." "Kevin!" Mary shouted. "I said no!" "I agree." Runesir also stepped forward, taking his spellbook out. "How dare you step up against us?" "Runesir!" Mary said in a warning tone, but was override by Ashley. "Yeah, you can't tell us what to do, you jerk!" Ashley tried to move forward, but Lucas held her back, a look of anger on his own face. "Guys, we cannot go around getting into fights." Mary tried to hold her team back, hoping her authority as team leader would hold against their anger. "We're just going to go. This isn't worth fighting for." "Good to see a freak who knows their place," the leader barked out with a laugh. "I guess your mama kept you around long enough to teach you how worthless you lot are." Mary stiffened at that. "What did you say?" "Impressive, too. I couldn't imagine having a freak child like you lot," the leader kept going. "How long did she last before throwing you in a river? Probably threw herself in with you, trying to make sure she got the job done. Guess she failed." The whole hooligan gang burst into laughter as Mary went quiet. She balled her fist and stood shaking. With a voice lined with fury, Mary'd order, "Adrian, kick their ass." "You sure?" Adrian frowned and leaned in, lowering his voice so only the group could hear. "Listen, I'm down for it, but you're still the boss here. You tell us to walk away, I'll back you." "Adrian!" Mary was nearly shouting. "I'm telling you to break their fucking faces. Now!" That was more than enough for Adrian. He stood up straight with a wide, almost evil grin, his height towering over everyone as he stepped forward. "You got it, ma'am." The hooligans lost their mirth as they tried to ready themselves. The leader shouted with a shaky voice, "We're not fucking—" His sentence was cut off when he lost his breath from Adrian's gut punch. Falling backwards to the floor, the rumbling sound of Adrian cracking his knuckles rolled over them all. He looked at them as he chuckled the question, "Who's next?" The hooligans charged. The first ones were those who had weapons, like bats and hockey sticks, worthless against Adrian, who simply knocked them away or tanked them on his shoulders and chest. Whenever one of them pulled a knife and tried to lunge at Adrian's blindside, he was stopped by Kevin catching his arm and decking him hard in the face. After that, the hooligans split themselves between Adrian and Kevin. Over a dozen hooligans had confronted the group, and all of them had taken a fall. But they were rotating their weapons and trying to outlast the duo. Pathetic, mundane mooks. Runesir spat out with venom as he watched the fight go on. They really don't know their place. Hypocrite much? Naziri said next to him. Not really. That would require us to be on equal standing. Runesir said as he opened his book and weaved a spell off a page with a shout of magic words. Dadir Sabna! With that, the fight was over. The hooligans lost consciousness either immediately or with only a meager resistance. As the last one gave out and slumped unmoving, Adrian roared out in laughter. Someone should call a medic! Adrian laughed as he stepped over the hooligan piles. His roaring laughs filled the mall as onlookers watched the group load up on the tram and take off, returning to the city. It had been a long day for Runesir, likely the longest he could remember. Study and practice, no matter how soon began or late ended, were all flashes compared to the activities of this day. Still, Runesir was prepared to finish the day with the studying he promised his father as he stepped into his house and became Runesir the Younger once more. Father, I have returned home! Runesir the Younger called out. A rustling was coming from his father's study. The door was ajar. For what reason, Runesir the Younger couldn't think of. So he drew up a well-worn working for a shield spell he could turn into a blast. He stepped to the door and shoved the door wide open with the spell ready, shouting, Who is here? The who was Professor Runesir, scrambling around, pulling books off shelves and artifacts off walls and out of storage, both public and hidden. He turned to see his son, and a look of shameful relief came to his face. Ah, son, I'm so sorry for this, but I must cancel our plans. An issue has arose. May I ask the nature of this issue? Runesir dropped his working and stepped further in. Could I be of assistance? I'm sure you could, but I have plenty help, and it would take time to get you in the loop. I understand, father. Please, worry not. I do not hold this against you. Runesir the Younger bowed his head to his father. His father stopped for a moment and looked to the boy and smiled. You're a good man, son. Thank you. Professor Runesir said, and started to place the many items he gathered into a bag. Books and gems and various other items. The last his 7-foot staff, all down into a bag the size of a melon. I promise, we will spend an entire day studying whatever you wish, son. Thank you, father. Runesir the Younger stepped aside to allow his father to leave, and was left alone. Alone in his father's study. A small gesture with a big meaning, as is the nature of a wizard, giving the greatest of value to the smallest of things. After all, this was the first time he had been allowed alone in his father's study. Runesir the Younger, though only Runesir with his father absent, scanned the bookshelf. Numerous texts stretched the wall, and in various languages too. One book, though, caught his eye. The book he had sought earlier that day. The Basic Complexities of the Basics. Pulling the book and opening the cover, he was surprised to see, written in old ink, Property of Progress City Public Library, Virginia. Such a small detail.